In literary fiction, there seems to be a hierarchy of difficult books. The top being Finnegan's Wake, being almost a genre unto itself, and then the bottom three after that would be Gravity's Rainbow, Ulysses, and Infinite Jest. Now, I disagree with Infinite Jest being on par with those two other books, but being in the Instagram literary community, I've been finding a lot more books that kind of match that Ulysses quality. Books like Wits, books that even match Finnegan's Wake quality with Bottom's Dream and Larva. A difficult book is have been challenged and expanded upon, which is great. And usually for the Ulysses criteria, it's a book that's somewhere near the author's magnum opus. It's around 700 pages, and and, and there's just a lot of literary games they play in it. But never would I thought there would be a book that would challenge that and fit into that hierarchy that's less than 700 pages, about 500 pages, and it's not even the author's magnum opus. That book today is Lookout Cartridge by Joseph McElroy. This book accomplishes something incredible that I've seen in a lot of McElroy's other works, but done in a way where I almost can't comprehend it. And it's something like Pulse, you can see it as a very large, long, abstract puzzle. However, with this one, it seems like everything McElroy was trying to do in his early and later career, he accomplishes in this book and creates a literary landscape that's so much parts disorienting and confusing as that's relevant and ripe filled with deep characterizations and symbolism strung throughout the book. And this is a masterpiece that is well deserved as placed as a Ulysses-like, in my opinion. Now, the plot of it is almost impossible to describe, but basically, there's an abstract art film that the main character Cartwright makes, and due to something within that film, it creates an international conspiracy where everybody's looking for it, and it's presumably be destroyed or gets destroyed later. Cartwright's life and some of his family members' life is in danger. Now, if that sounds vague and like I didn't read the book, that is really what the plot is of the book. Now, this will be a spoiler review. I can't talk about this book without spoiling some aspects. But it's also difficult to spoil this book. So if you're afraid of me ruining the experience for you, I'm going to explain later why the experience is not necessarily in the plot, but at the same time it is in the plot. I know that sounds weird. Now, this book had some aspects working against it at the beginning. I just finished Actress in the House, and I picked up this one, and I felt like this book was a lot like Actress in the House. When I was reading the first half, I was like, okay, it's a very loose plot structure, and it's more meant to show the going-ons of like New York and everything, like an actress, and just their interpersonal relationships with the characters. But then I found like, no, this is on a grander scale because it's dealing with London, it's dealing with New York, it's dealing with a bunch of archaeological sites as well. But I just kind of felt like it's kind of the same thing to some degrees. I was kind of thinking, how am I going to talk about this book? But then the second half of the book kicks in, and McElroy takes a hard shift, and the plot kicks in hard. And it is such a disorienting and confusing plot. And I was like, what is happening? And near the end of the section, there was some pulse-like elements to it as well. And when you finish the whole book and you see the whole scope of it, you just realize how incredible it is. And how, even though I say Ulysses-like, and there's other books that are like Ulysses, this is a stylistic thing unto himself. I said Actors in the House was like Prime DeLillo. This book is quintessentially McElroy. This book, it does things that I really haven't seen done to this extent anywhere else. It's like when a musician makes a new sound and he just develops that sound so much it becomes a genre unto itself. This is what McElroy does, and it's very incredible. Now, the detective plot in this book is also very strange because there's only a handful of characters in this book. Even though it's an international conspiracy, you can probably count all the characters on both hands. All the characters have very interpersonal relationships, they're all connected, and everybody who's in on this conspiracy is all directly involved in Cartwright's life. And it just became this really strange thing where had a murder mystery, but all the suspects were your family members. It's bizarre, but it makes sense when you read it as well, and there's barely any second characters in the book. Now, I did skim through some reviews and essays, and some of them I just don't really agree with, so I'm not going to mention too much here, but one guy said Cartwright might be a computer virus. Another said that, he might have some, like, godlike entity as a computer system, and I can totally see that, because even though this sounds science fiction and there's a weird time travel device near the end of the book that I don't understand, I'm not sure if it's real or if it's like Napoleon Dynamite kind of time travel device. McElroy was trying to copy computer systems within this book, and even though it's not a sci-fi book, the structure of this book really makes you think, like, is all this a projection of the character onto the scenery, or is this a computer system? Is he a virus? And some of those thoughts come up and they seem valid. I don't think I personally agree that this is a computer system. I don't think there's enough evidence in the book to qualify that, but I do have my own personal theory. Within the film, there is heavy emphasis on Stonehenge. There was a druid ceremony at Stonehenge, which is strange. I mean, never. There's a character who's called the druid, and we just don't learn much about it or why they're called druids. I feel like it really goes to what a lot of the book is saying, in that with Stonehenge, we don't know who built it. In our reality, we don't know who built it or to what effects they built it for. We just know that it's there, it's super old, and there's almost, we also know there's like some spiritual or like quote unquote godly reason that that thing is there, but we don't know why. We investigate it, we keep studying it. It doesn't invalidate its importance, and we keep trying to learn about it until we do it so much that the subject of Stonehenge is less about trying to figure out what it actually is about and more of the process of actually investigating and learning about Stonehenge. And that's what I feel the effect of McElroy is trying to get at in this book. It's less about the solutions, it's less about the answers of these things exist. It's more about the process of figuring out. McElroy is all about the process, and this book does that to such a heightened degree. Now, I'm even going to have to reread this book because a lot of the processes I don't understand because it was so difficult. And I was trying to focus on understanding like the environment and the characters, and then I was trying to figure out the plot. But through that, I didn't put enough time in focusing on the actual processes that he wants me to realize. And I think I wanted something too, because first off, two Instagram people who I put right here said, like, yeah, this book is, you won't understand everything. I don't think you're supposed to. One guy read it twice and still didn't understand everything, and like he even tracked the characters, like there were still mysteries. So this book is not meant to open up everything to you. And especially big thanks to Chris Williams. I hit the Stonehenge theory to him and he really liked it, and he said McElroy makes sense more underneath that theory. But also, I read an essay by McElroy where he was talking about a Buddhist statue and just like all the things he didn't understand about the statue, and then relating it to the rest of New York as well, that I'll put in the description below. And I think that's such a prime example, because it's almost like the reverse of Pynchon, where Pynchon puts all these plots, all these grand characters, all these grand stuff in the novel to show the effect that we can't understand the systems that are around us. We're too small, the systems are too big, we don't have that power, and we won't understand, and nobody will understand. So while Pynchon is focusing it on a macro level, McElroy is focusing it on a micro level, in that we can't understand all the processes in our everyday life. Like examples, I'm sure if you've been in a relationship before, you've had that thing where it doesn't work out or the person just ghosts you and leaves, and you have no idea why. Here's somebody that was very close and personal to you, and it worked out, and you don't know why. And even if you figure out some information later, it still doesn't explain everything. So a lot of what we have to deal with in our everyday personal lives is just left to guesswork. It's just left to, how much do I know about this person? I don't know the correct answer, but it doesn't invalidate the relationship. You just can't necessarily live that unknown. As humans, we try to figure out stuff, so we put an answer to that. We make an explanation to that, even though it might be wrong. It's just like Cartridge trying to figure out what's going on in a lot of the conspiracies around him. It leaves a lot of guesswork to him. And it leaves a lot of guesswork to the reader. There's sections and there's parts of this where he does not say explicitly, but he'll space it out throughout the novel. A great example is that when he's with his daughter Jenny, and who's also gone trying to help him out for reasons unexplained, you kind of get an inkling that there's some sort of incestuous relationship going on between the two of them. He kind of like it into his daughter. There is one with Tessa in the book as well. McElroy likes to do a lot of incest in his books, but almost normalized to a degree where it's not necessarily abusive, except maybe an actress in the house. But the characters don't see it as necessarily bad. Now, what is in the book to tell me that there might be some incestuous feelings towards Jenny from Cartwright, his daughter? One is that he has a segment where he thinks about his son. It's like, I wonder if he's masturbating to his sister. I used to do that when I was a kid. It's like, okay, that's kind of weird, but okay. And then, like, maybe like 100 or so pages later, he mentions how Jenny looks like his sister. And it's like, there is something kind of strange there. So, or just like aspects like where, he's sleeping with somebody in New York. It's like, wait, he just left his house. Who's sleeping with him? And then later on, it does turn out, it's like, Tessa, he's having an affair, but his wife is also having an affair as well. So you get elements like that where it's not explicitly said, but it's strewn out throughout the book. And that makes it really difficult with the plot as well, because in the beginning of the book, you're just kind of focusing on like the aspects, some of the relation to the characters. You don't know who exactly is important or not. It turns out everybody's important. And then later on in the book, McElroy just assumes that you know these people, and he just starts listing them off as first names. Like, imagine if you're talking to your friends about your friends that you already know. It's like, oh yeah, Anthony Martell. You're not putting like, oh yeah, Anthony, the guy who works the forklift, Martell, who does supply chain. You're not saying that to give you clues. You're just saying their names. And that's what McElroy does throughout the second half of the book. So if you need to take notes, I think that would be great, especially since a lot of characters' names are very similar and they just get thrown around. There's some sentences where there's like 3 proper nouns just in a row and you're like, oh my god, who are these people again? He changes time periods and he changes location with barely any indication. Like, he might say stuff like, oh yeah, in 38, and bam, he was there, but he does not use past tense in this book. You just have to kind of infer based on the character actions, on the character interactions and the location where he's at. Location's a bit easier to do, but they become complicated when you put time into that as well. So McElroy is constantly shifting between thought process, between location, between time, between character interactions. Well, he'll have long dissertations in between sentences in a conversation of the character just thinking of other places or other times and locations, and then come back to that. So it can be really difficult to keep track of where you are in the novel. But in combination with that, that's where a little bit of the computer analysis theory kind of does come into play, because Cartwright starts referring to himself as a god. Now, the reason I don't necessarily think it's he's a computer program is because there is a lot of references to like Mayan, Irish culture, and Scottish culture in this book, and like particularly the mythology. He kind of shifts through the information. He's kind of the person who's able to see all the connections throughout the novel. It's almost a meta commentary in that what the main characters and the reader's ability to see all the aspects of what's going on in the novel and all the aspects of these people's lives and happenings, and also to be able to get information in such a quick way, much like a computer. However, where I think it's not necessarily a computer program is that Cartwright questions his ability as a god. Can gods change? Do gods need rehabilitation? Can gods see everything? Even though he has this special ability of being a main character in the novel, and he's so lucky just to stumble upon people and have these weird almost circumstances that like just kind of happen in his benefit, he's not able to see everything. He's not able to understand everything. He can't. No person can understand it. And like in McElroy's essay, we are only constructed by how other people view us. We can only infer in how they view us. And just because Cartwright is able to view other people, that still doesn't define him completely, because there's other people viewing those other people, which is probably why he has all the characters interconnected. If they were all separated, it would just be Cartwright's visions of them, and the credence to what he sees in them is correct. But since they're all interconnected and they all have separate dealings behind his back, we don't get the full scope of it. Cartwright's view of them doesn't purely define them, because there's other views of the characters that we just don't see. Again, making that thing of we don't know everything. And even if Cartwright is God, God doesn't see everything. Now, to talk about the film, because I do feel like there's a meta aspect of the film as well. Well, it's a film just with a bunch of seemingly random images, like a druid cult, a baseball game, um, a discussion in an unplaced room with potential terrorists. And one article said, like, because of the terrorists that people are chasing after the film. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think there's a clear answer. There is a terrorist, Lynn in Cromnia in the book, who dies at the end, but I don't think that's the reason that the film is looking at to be destroyed. And I don't think, again, the reason matters too much. I think it's more the processes of the film. And if we look at that, there's multiple layers. One, why are we so obsessed with the film that just seems to be a bunch of random avant-garde disconnected images? Two, it's like, which copy of the film is correct? Is it Dagger's copy, Cartwright's friend, who made his own separate edit of it? Or is it the original cut that Cartwright has? So there's two copies of the film. Which one is more correct than the other? Three, there's also a memoir that Cartwright wrote through journal entries of the film. So even after he believes it's destroyed, he has that and he has a memory of it. And then four, Cartwright's own memory of the film as well. And Dagger's memory to some extent, but more Cartwright's. So even though we have this list of disconnected images of the film, which one is the correct one? Which one is the one that should be destroyed, should be kept? Which one is the most accurate version of it? And if one of them is lost, then which one do we go off? Do we go off the other edit, or do we stay with the journal? And how much does the medium of the journal go away from the medium of the film? And how much is Dagger's interpretation more valid than Cartwright's, since he was the cameraman? And in a lot of ways, he set up a lot of the shots without Cartwright as well. And again, that just kind of goes to the process of information and interpretation. And why is that important? A lot of it has to relate to this specific video, if you really think about it. Why am I so concerned about a book with a bunch of disconnected images in it? Why are you so concerned about it also? Which analysis is correct of it? You reading the book and having your interpretation, my interpretation of it, this video, if somebody else makes a video on YouTube, is that more valid? Or is a written interview more valid as an interpretation of the book? And it goes to that meta-analysis and intertextuality of that texts are living, texts are breathing, and they're always changing. Even though it's just one book, and it's like, how many interpretations can you get from one book? The book also has its systems where, when you get into the finer details, people might have different interpretations of it. Like, I'm already going against some other articles and reviews that I don't agree with, but which one is the more the correct one? Which one is the correct interpretation? And I think, again, it's not so much about finding what the proper interpretation of the book, or finding the proper interpretation of the film in the book, within the characters in the book. It's more about the processes of thought, and more the processes of understanding that level. And again, like Stoneheads, the process of understanding something that you won't get the answer to, and the validity in those processes as well, the processes of learning. One final thing, this book reminds me of Ashbery a lot, where when you're reading one section, and then you go to the next paragraph, and you go to the next paragraph, you're kind of like, wait, what the hell did I just read at the top of the paragraph? He really plays with schemas a lot, in that he just kind of breaks them and just is information overload. So it's like when Ashbery, you go from one stanza to the next. Like, I'm always at the beginning of Ashbery, I feel like I'm understanding it. At the end of the poem of an Ashbery, I'm like I don't remember the beginning of it, and that happens a lot in Lookout Cartridge. So you'll do a lot of sections where you reread, and you'll reread the paragraph, and you're like, wait, no, I read it right. Just that there's so much information that it just kind of goes out of your mind. Now, there's a lot of aspects to this book that I probably left out as well. Unless you did like a multi-part series, nobody can really touch on all of it, or you'd have to write a larger book as well, like kind of like a compendium of like people do with Ulysses and stuff like that. But I will be revisiting this book in the future. I feel like I got a lot of the major themes, but I feel like there's a lot of detail that I missed, and there's a lot of details in the plot that I missed also that I might be able to grasp as well. If you read this book, I'd like to hear what your opinions on what I said are, and I'd like to see if there's anything that you feel is pertinent in the book that either goes against it or agrees with what I said. But this book, it's a masterpiece. It is something I've never seen any other author do to this extent. It's beautiful, and it's not like Pulse where you can almost describe that as a puzzle, even though I really love Pulse. But this is a lot more literary oriented, and this is a story, and an important story, and one that makes you really question the processes of life, of thought, of information, how we go about understanding things within our world without having a heavy sci-fi element to it. It is all based off of information that we can see in our own personal lives from a day-to-day basis, and connections that just might seem arbitrary or ridiculous, but again, it makes you question, much like an Ashbery poem, where Ashbery collects a lot of, disconnected phrases and scenes and puts them together. So stuff like Mayan civilization, and then the importance on a jaguar car, jaguars being so important in Mexican mythology, or an Ariel stabbing somebody, and like, what does that mean? Or stiff, which they say it's a Yiddish term, but when I looked it up, I couldn't find it. So it's like, well, what does stiff mean again? And all these aspects that make you question, and not in like a Delilo way, like it does in Actors in the House. There's a little bit of that, but make you question it in just the form of processes and how does information relate. This is a must-read. I'm so looking forward to Women and Men, but look at Cartridge by Joseph McElroy, a masterpiece that stands in tandem with Gravity's Rainbow and Ulysses.
Next and final stop, Oceanside Transit Centre.